there's an article that I want to get to. But before I get to that article, because I was reading it and there was something that was mentioned in there that I feel I should do a video on this, basically defining what that thing is before I get to that. The article is going to be in another video. They talked about something called first victims and who exactly are the first victims. So all the Scream fans know how the opening sequence works. The opening sequences to these movies. And so, for example, with Scream 1, it opens up before we get, beginning credits and whatnot. So in the first film, the first victim was Casey Becker, who was played by Drew Barrymore. I'm looking at the paper. I actually had to cheat a little bit just to memorize some of the names of the actors and actresses who played some of the minor characters. So it starts off with her being in the house alone, and she gets a phone call from somebody, and obviously we know it's Ghostface, and he asks her the basic questions, what's your favorite scary movie? What's your favorite horror film? And of course, they go through the list of all the popular slasher films and horror movies. They go through Jason, Freddy, Halloween, Chucky, The Hills Have Eyes, Dawn of the Dead, Texas Chainsaw, all that stuff. So she ends up being the first person getting killed by Ghostface in that movie. So that's all first victim really means, is the first person to get killed in the movie. For the first movie, that was Casey Becker, and Ghostface ended up in the house after this back and forth conversation. He chases her outside, eventually catches up with her, stabs her to death. In the second movie, the first two victims were Phil Stevens and Maureen Evans, played by Omar Epps and Jada Pinkett, respectively. That sequence was about them going to go see a movie. They went to go see a fictional film called Stab, which really was just an in movie that referenced the events of Scream 1. And in that, you also see Casey Becker, but this time she's played by Heather Graham instead of Drew Barrymore. And Phil Stevens goes into the men's room, and Ghostface is there, and he stabs him in the face through the stall. And he's dead. Ghostface comes to the theater. Maureen thinks it's him in costume. It's not. You have all these people in the theater that are hyped up, and he ends up stabbing her, but nobody really pays attention to it because there's so many different people dressed in costume and so many people were dressed in Ghostface. So she ended up being one of the first victims in that movie. In the third movie, you have Cotton Weary, played by Liev Schreiber, and Christine Hamilton, played by Kelly Rutherford. And how that sequence went was he's in the car away from home, gets a call from Ghostface threatening to kill his loved ones and his friends. And she's at the house and she hears something and she thinks that he's there playing a prank on her, when in reality, that's not the case. And again, all the real fans had already seen this. So when Cotton arrives at the house and he's looking for her and she's overly defensive, she grabbed a bat or a golf club or whatever the object that she grabbed was, and she's trying to fight him off, and he's confused because he does it. And then he starts to suspect, like, okay, is somebody in the house? Her back is against the door opens up, Ghostface comes up behind, stabs her in the back. Then he's fighting with Cotton, eventually stabs and kills him. So they were the first couple victims in the third movie. In the fourth movie, the opening sequence was a little bit different. So it starts off with Stab 6, I believe that was. And in Stab 6, you had two girls by the name of Trudy and Sherry, played by Sinead Grimes and Lucy Hale. And in that, Trudy is texting back and forth with a guy on Facebook. And she says it's some hot guy who happens to be, like a Facebook stalker or a troll or whatever, some sort. And it turns out that, of course, fake profile. And they get a phone call and Sherry answers it. And she's looking for, the Ghostface killer is just basically harassing him through the phone. She hangs up. They get a knock at the door. They hesitantly answer it. Sherry goes outside. Nobody's there. Trudy gets a call or a text that says, "I'm not outside. I'm right beside you." Ghostface comes in the house, stabs her to death, and right after that stabs Sherry to death. Those were the first couple victims in, well, for that particular segment of the opening sequence. And then instead of seeing Scream 4, you see Stab 6, and you see two other girls watching that on a television. This is a movie within a movie. And the other two girls who are watching that are Rachel and Chloe, played by Anna Paquin and Kristen Bell. And in that, they're having a little back and forth conversation about, you know, so Rachel thinks that the stab movies and horror movies are stupid. And she's going on this rant about how all horror films are the same and predictable. Oh, this person runs and, you know, there's no element of surprise. You can see everything coming. There's no new element, blah, blah, blah. And in the middle of her rant, Chloe pulls out a knife and stabs her in the stomach and tells her to shut up and watch the movie because Chloe's a horror fan. And she's dead. And, of course, Chloe is a survivor and she's a killer there. And that sequence was Stab 7, which was watched by Jenny Randall and Marnie Cooper, played by Amy Teagarden and Brittany Robertson, respectively. And now we get to the actual what's going on in Scream 4. So they were watching Stab 7. And in that, you have Jenny pretends to hear a noise and goes upstairs, and she prank calls Marnie, and she uses the Ghostface voice app to trick her into saying this is the last person you'll ever see alive. And she gets scared, and then Jenny laughs about it, which upsets Marnie temporarily. And then while they're on the phone, she proceeds to say, hey, I don't know why you like these movies. And then you hear her getting choked out and attacked through the phone, and the phone goes to the dial tone. Jenny goes downstairs. There's a phone. The telephone is on the floor in the dark, and she thinks that Marnie is pranking her. She gets a call from Ghostface and implies that he killed her friend. Throws her body through glass window. Her corpse is there on the floor. Ghostface comes in, chases after Jenny, goes into the garage, and stabs her in the back. And the garage scene there was in reference to Tatum Riley getting killed in the garage in the first Scream. Tatum Riley, who was played by Rose McGowan, who was Dewey's younger sister. Dewey Riley, who's played by David Arquette. And he stabs and kills her. Those are the first few victims in the fourth movie. The fifth movie, Tara Carpenter, who's played by Jenna Ortega, gets a call from Ghostface. Same mess, the same stuff. What's your favorite scary movie? Ghostface is texting from the phone of a girl named Amber, who actually turned out to be one of the psycho killers later on in the movie. If you didn't see it, you'll just watch it. I'm sorry to spoil that for anybody who didn't see it, but I mean, the movie's been out a bit, so there will be some spoilers here. And she thinks that Amber's in danger, so she's getting ready to run out the house, Tara. And as she opens the door, Ghostface is right there, chases her in the house. They fight a bit, and she gets stabbed a few times, and then she's hospitalized. Now, the thing that made this opening sequence different was the fact that she was the first victim to actually survive. So she wasn't killed in this opening sequence. Now, there's some videos and articles that debate on whether or not she should have been killed. I don't know. I think it's a good thing that she survived it. But hey, to each his own. I mean, every opinion is different. And then in the sixth movie, which is so far the last movie that came out, but luckily there will be more. The first victim in that movie is an English college professor by the name of Laura Crane, who was played by Samara Weaving. And she's waiting in some fancy restaurant for a date, and she's waiting for the appearance of a guy by the name of Reggie, and he's texting her, and he claims that he doesn't know where the building is at, so he lures her outside, and she mindlessly walks into a dark alley because he says, oh, you might have to go down this alley to get here. And of course, that was red flag. That was a major red flag right there. Ghostface comes up behind, stabs her by a dumpster, and it turns out that that wasn't Reggie. That wasn't who she thought it was. Turns out it was somebody by the name of Jason Carvey, played by Tony Revolori. That's one of her students, and the reason he killed her was because she gave him a C, apparently, on an assignment. Which, if you think about it, I mean, that's... I mean, nobody here is condoning murder, but it's like to because you got a C on an assignment. Yeah, I'm going to go kill the professor who gave me a C. Yeah, that makes sense. And then later, that goes to Jason going back to his apartment. Ghostface calls him. He thinks that it's his roommate, Greg. And they play this game of hotter, colder. The Ghostface is on the phone saying, hey, you're getting warmer. You're getting warmer. He goes to a closet. He's not there. He thinks that Greg is trying to prank him. And then he goes over to the refrigerator, opens it up. Greg's severed head is in the fridge. Kind of Jeffrey Dahmer type style. Like, hey, we got human parts in the fridge here. Ghostface comes up behind Jason, stabs him in the back, stabs him in the stomach repeatedly. And he kills him there. So he ended up being both a killer and a victim. So we haven't really seen that one too often. So that opening sequence was a little bit different too. So at this point, I think you get the point. So those are who the first victims are. That's what first victim is. The first person to die in a Scream movie. So that's what that's about. And I will get to the next article shortly. So to all the Scream fans and horror film fans, like and subscribe. Thank you for watching this, and there's more to come.